For those who don't know, my family became religious in a bit of a vacuum, and so we had some odd practices. When we were kids, we had two goats, Zoom and Gali Gali. Anyway, before Yom Kippur, we'd send one of our goats away, to Azazel. Of course, we didn't throw the goat over the side of a mountain. We didn't have the stomach for that, and anyway, goats are very, very sure-footed. Of course, inevitably, the goat would come back. One year, we even drove the goat away, as in a truck. But sure enough, about 4 days later, it was back. That didn't seem to be such a good omen. As you might imagine, this process made quite an impression on me. What were we doing with this poor goat, and how did it find its way home? Well, I have some ideas on Azazel, but I still don't know how the animal found its way back. To understand Azazel, let's start with the concept of kaper. This word is generally translated as atonement, and often used in relation to a kind of sin, chata. More critically, the bigger set of rituals surrounding Azazel are kind of obsessed with kaper. There's a reason it's called Yom Kippur, or the Day of Kaper. So, let's unpack this. First, what is chata, or sin? Well, when Joseph's brothers beg him not to retaliate after Yaakov dies, they define chata as doing evil. Where good is an act of creation, chata is an act of destruction. But chata is more than an act. It also represents a destructive impulse. The first use of the word for chata is in regard to Cain. The text says, by the opening, chata is expectantly waiting and it desires you. Chata has personification. Even more critically, it is trying to get in through an opening. By contrast, the first use of the word kaper isn't about sin at all. Instead, it refers to pits used by Noach to protect his ark. Kaper here is both the sealant and the act of sealing. Put these two together and you have the concept of kaper, sealing against a spiritually corrosive desire to destroy. In this light, this week's focus on the grand annual act of kaper is about sealing the people against spiritual corrosion. In a way, this is like regularly applying pitch to a boat or paint to a house. You are sealing your physical soul so that spiritual corrosion can't affect its core. How does the seal work? In most cases, we create the seal by placing some aspect of ourselves in the offerings and then bringing the offering to God. The animal's blood, its potential, takes on an attribute of the people and is then dedicated to God. In a way, we recommit ourselves to God's project of creation without destruction and thus protect our animating souls from the desire to destroy. This is why we can't eat blood. By eating blood, we bring the animal's unrefined soul into us instead of putting ourselves into the animal. We undermine our own souls instead of reinforcing them. This idea of kaper as a sealant extends. We give a half shekel as a kaper before the census. It seals us from the dangers of being held up before God. The Aron has a kaper with keruvim, or angels, on it. Those angels were last seen closing off access to the Garden of Eden. They seal the Aron and the Ten Commandments from intrusion. They enable it to be timeless. The offerings don't only kaper the people, they kaper the altar, the Mishkan, and the Holy of Holies itself. Why would the altar and the Holy of Holies need atonement? They don't, but they do need to be sealed against spiritual corrosion. When a man commits manslaughter, the family of the deceased can ask for a kaper. It is a payment to seal him against their vengeance. Finally, when Moshe does kaper for the people after the sin of the calf, he doesn't wipe away or cover up the sin. He just, forever, prevents it from overwhelming the people. In more modern times, some of the best antivirus software is from a company called Kaspersky. It forms a seal against computer viruses. Of course, that one's probably just a coincidence. Anyway, immediately after the laws of Yom Kippur, the day of sealing God's timeless people against the effects of sin, there are a grab bag of commands which follow. They form a social seal, protecting our symbolic dedication to the core value of creation without waste or destruction. With the first set of these, we were forbidden from uncovering the weakness of those close to us, and by extension ourselves. Forbidding exposure is kind of like sealing something, right? So what about Azazel? Well, there are two goats in this operation. One is offered to God as a kaper to Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, the name of God that incorporates the past, present, and future. It seals the people against spiritual corrosion and becomes a part of the timeless through its sacrifice. The other is given its own kaper. It is stood before God, sealing against the corrosion of the people's sins. Then the people's sins, avonot, are placed on it, and it is sent to Azazel. Azazel literally means goat of disappearance. It is sent to a place of no time and banished from our universe altogether. This offering is an object lesson for us. We can dedicate our potential to God, sealing ourselves against the corrosion of our sins and destructive desires. With this, we can become part of the timeless. Or we can allow our sins to penetrate our core, and then we can vanish from time itself, as if we never existed. Even these thousands of years later, this stark contrast remains perhaps the strongest spiritual seal there can be. Shabbat Shalom.